For some time now, Tom Friedman has held a special place in the world of journalism. Whether he is writing about globalization, technology, or climate change and what the misuse of the environment is doing to our planet, Tom has always had a way of diagnosing and dissecting the moment. His genius is not just in his ability to see what others seemingly cannot, but the application of this knowledge is what sets him apart. In his most recent book, Thank You for Being Late, An Optimist's Guide to Thriving in the Age of Accelerations, he has done it again.
I think what is shaping more things in more places, in more ways on more days, is that we're in the middle of three nonlinear accelerations all at the same time in the three largest forces on the planet, which I call the market, Mother Nature, and Moore's Law. So the market for me is globalization, but not your grandfather's globalization. That was containers on ships. That's actually going down. To me, what is driving globalization today is digital globalization. Everything is now being digitized and globalized, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or PayPal or MOOCs, or this event, which now can be digitized and globalized. That's really what's driving the world from connected to hyper-connected to interdependent. If you put digital globalization on a graph, whoop, it looks like a hockey stick. The Mother Nature for me is climate change, biodiversity loss, and population growth. Excuse me. If you put that on a graph, it looks like, whoop, it looks like a hockey stick. And Moore's Law, coined by Gordon Moore, the co-founder of Intel in 1965, posited that the speed and power of microchips would double every 24 months. It's now closer to 30. Never mind. Moore's Law has held up now for 52 years. And that is the exponential that's driving all technology. It's really the underlying engine of the whole thing. If you put it on a graph, it looks like, whoop, a hockey stick. We're in the middle of three hockey stick accelerations, all at the same time, with the three largest forces on the planet, the market, Mother Nature, and Moore's Law, and they're all interacting with each other. More Moore's Law drives more globalization drives more climate change, and by the way, more solutions as well. So what I think is going on is these accelerations aren't just changing the world, they're actually fundamentally reshaping the world. And they're reshaping 5 realms: politics, geopolitics, the workplace, ethics, and community. So let me just talk briefly about the engine of it all, which is that acceleration in Moore's Law. And my chapter on Moore's Law, because it's very hard for people to grasp an exponential, because we rarely encounter one in our lives. The only time you really encounter an exponential is when you're merging onto the freeway and suddenly go from 0 to 60. That's an exponential, you know, velocity plus acceleration. But you rarely encounter that. In fact, the engineers at Intel once, to explain the power of Moore's Law, took a 1971 Beetle, VW Beetle, and said, what if this 71 VW Beetle improved at the same rate as microchips over the last 40-odd years? And they estimated that if it did, that Beetle today would go 300,000 miles an hour. It would get 2 million miles per gallon, and it would cost 4 cents. In fact, you'd be able to drive it your whole life on 1 tank of gas. That is an exponential. That's what we're in the middle of. Now, my chapter on Moore's Law is called What the Hell Happened in 2007. 2007 sounds like such an innocuous year, but this was something I literally stumbled across in my research and then began to put together. What happened in 2007? Well, the year was kicked off by Steve Jobs unveiling the first iPhone at the Moscone Center in San Francisco in January 2007, beginning a process by which we are now putting into the hands of, in time, everyone on the planet, a handheld computer with more computing power than the Apollo space mission connected to the internet. That's what we're doing. That was how 2007 kicked off. But 2007 was just clearing its throat. Because also in 2007, the most important software program you've probably never heard of, called Hadoop, which is named after the founder's son's toy elephant, was also released into the wild. So Hadoop is the software that enables us to take 1 million computers or 10 million computers and get them to work together as one. And that is the foundation of big data. Also in 2007, a company called GitHub launched. GitHub's the second most important software platform you probably have never heard of. It is now the world's biggest library of open source software. There isn't a company in America today that doesn't directly or indirectly draw on GitHub's resources. Because now if you start a company and you want a credit card payment system, you don't figure it out yourself. You just go to GitHub now and take it off the shelf. Adapt it to your company, maybe improve it, and then put it back on the shelf, just like a library for the next person to take advantage of. In 2007, a guy up in Seattle named Jeff Bezos released into the wild the world's first ebook reader called the Kindle. In 2007, another company called Twitter broke off on its own independent platform and went global. In 2007, IBM started the world's first cognitive computer called Watson. In 2007, Intel, for the first time, went off silicon and introduced non-silicon materials into its transistors, extending the exponential for Moore's law, and what you didn't know, vastly expanding your battery power and making possible computers like the MacBook Air. In 2007, this thing we call the cloud was born. Turns out, friends, 2007 may in time be understood as the single greatest technological inflection point since Gutenberg invented the printing press. And we completely missed it because of 2008. Okay? So right when the world went into this incredible technological inflection point and our physical technologies just took off, right when that happened, all of our social technologies, the political reform, the regulating, the deregulating that should have gone with that, completely froze because of 2008. And we are now living in that dislocation. And a lot of people got dislocated in that gap. So what actually happened in 2007? What produced this? What produced it is if you take your computer basically has 5 parts, 5 key parts. That microchip, that Moore's law microchip. It has a storage chip. It has software. It has networking, and it has a sensor. It has a camera, but it's a proxy for all sensors. In fact, all 5 of those have been in Moore's law. And in 2007, they all melded together into this thing we call the cloud. But I never use the word the cloud in my book because it sounds so soft, so fluffy, so cuddly. It sounds like a Joni Mitchell song. I've looked at clouds from both sides. Yeah. This ain't no cloud, folks. This is what I call in the book a supernova. The supernova is the explosion of a star. It's the largest force in nature. And what we have created with the melding of all these in 2007 is actually an incredible release of energy, just like an explosion of a star. And this release of energy has, into the hands of human beings and machines, has changed 4 kinds of power, almost overnight. It's changed the power of one. What one person can do now? Oh my God, we have a president who can tweet to hundreds of millions of people around the world directly, without an editor, a libel lawyer, or a filter. I'm not going there, so I'm just making a statement of fact, okay? But what's really scary is that the head of ISIS can do the exact same thing from Raqqa province. That's when you have a real amplification of individual power. It's changed the power of machines. Machines now have all 5 senses. We've never lived in a world of intelligent machines. So it's changed the power of one, changed the power of machines, it's changed the power of ideas. Ideas now flow and change at a speed we've never seen before. Dylan Roof, this terrible guy who shot up a black church in South Carolina. In a week, the Confederate flag, which had flown over that Capitol proudly for almost a century, it was gone thanks to Twitter and Facebook in a week. No more Confederate flag. So ideas now whip around and change faster than we've ever seen before. And lastly, it's changed the power of many. We now, with our amplified powers, are now a force of and in nature, which is why the new geophysical era is actually being named after us, the Anthropocene, because we are now the biggest force driving climate change. Now, my argument again is that these 4 changes in power are reshaping the world. So first of all, it's reshaping the workplace. I know a lot of you are experiencing that. And my chapter on that is called How We Turn AI into IA. How do we turn artificial intelligence into intelligent assistance, ANCE, intelligent assistants, ANTS, and intelligent algorithms. So more people in their work and life can actually live and thrive at a higher pace of change. So my chapter on intelligent assistance example I use is the Human Resources Department at AT&T. I spent a lot of time at AT&T in Dallas. AT&T, 360,000 employees, living right next to the supernova, competing every day, with Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint. There's a pretty good chance that what AT&T is doing in its Human Resources Department is going to come to a neighborhood near you. So what is AT&T's human resources strategy? Very simply, they begin every year with Randall Stephenson, their CEO, giving a radically transparent speech about how he sees the world, where he sees AT&T's business going, and what skills you need to be a worker that year at AT&T. Then they put every AT&T employee on their own in-house LinkedIn system. So they've got Joanne there, and they see that, I'm making up the number, but that there are 10 skills you need to be a worker now at AT&T, and they see that Joanne has 7 of them. She's doing well. But she's missing 3. Then they partnered with Sebastian Thrun from Udacity, who created online nano degrees for all 10 skills. Then they come to Joanne and say, Joanne, here's the deal. We will give you up to $8,500 a year to take these 3 courses you're missing. And by the way, if you want to take an archaeology course, we're in for that too. Or if you want to take our online master's degree we just created with Georgia Tech for $6,000 in computer science, we're in for that too. There's just one condition, Joy. You have to take these courses on your own time. At home, after work. Now, Joanne may say, you know what, I've actually climbed up one too many telephone poles, and I just don't want to work here anymore. In which case, they now have a wonderful severance package for Joanne, but she will not be working at AT&T anymore. AT&T's social contract with their employees now is very simple. If Joanne takes those courses, they will promise her that when new jobs open, she will get the first crack. They won't go outside. But their message to her is that if you want to be a lifelong employee now at AT&T, you have to be a lifelong learner. If you want to be a lifelong employee, you have to be a lifelong learner. That's the only way now you can be a lifelong employee at AT&T. And that is the social contract coming to a neighborhood near you. So that's my example of intelligent assistance. Intelligent assistant, ANTS, my example is Qualcomm, another company you may never have heard of, or barely. They actually made the inside of your iPhone. That was not actually made by Apple. That was made by Qualcomm. They own all the patents on the inside of your iPhone. And they have an amazing 64-building campus in San Diego. I spent a lot of time with them and their founder, Irwin Jacobs, to understand telephonic technology. And 2 years ago, just in passing, they mentioned to me one day that they had taken 2 of their buildings, or 6 of their buildings, and put sensors on everything. Every pipe, every faucet, every sink, every door, window, HVAC system, computer, light bulb, they have everything censored now. What they do is they take all that data, they beam it up to the supernova, and then they beam it down onto an iPad for their janitors with an incredibly simple user interface. So if Joanne's computer breaks, or if she leaves her light on, or if her faucet breaks, they know immediately. They swipe down, it tells them where to get it repaired or how to repair it themselves. They have turned their janitors into maintenance technologists. Their janitors now give tours to foreign visitors. Think what that does for the dignity of a janitor, that he or she now has an intelligent assistant to help them live at this higher rate of acceleration. My example of intelligent algorithm is the partnership between the College Board and Khan Academy. This is to provide free PSAT and SAT prep. So we all know the story. In 11th grade, Joanne had to take the PSAT exam to get her ready for the SAT exam so she could get into a good college. If her parents were as neurotic as many of us, they went out and hired a tutor to goose her scores a little bit in math and verbal. It's okay, we all did it, you don't have to be embarrassed. A completely rigged game. If you could afford the tutor, you could goose your kids' scores 20, 30 points. If you didn't even know you could do this, you come from a disadvantaged family or neighborhood, let alone be able to afford the $200 an hour for a college student to tutor your kids, to goose your PSAT scores, you are at an incredible disadvantage. A completely rigged game. So 2 years ago, Sal Khan from Khan Academy, the online learning platform, partnered with the College Board, which administers the PSAT and SAT exam, and they created a platform for free PSA and SAT prep. So now Joanne takes the PSATs in 11th grade, and she gets her results back, and they say from Khan Academy, Joanne, you did well. You did well. You got good scores, but you have a problem with fractions and right angles. It then takes Joanne to a practice site just devoted to fractions and right angles for her precise weakness. Doesn't waste any of her time on all her strengths. If she does well there, it comes back and says, Joanne, have you ever heard of AP Math? Maybe Joanne came from a family or a neighborhood where no one had ever been through AP Math. In 12th grade, you could take AP Math, so she signs up. Does well, it takes you to another site with 180 college scholarships and another site where they have partnered with the Boys and Girls Clubs of America to provide coaches for any kid who wants to go through this process. Last year, 2 million American kids availed themselves of free PSAT and SAT prep on this platform, on this intelligent algorithm. Let me, because we're here at Carnegie, let me say a little bit about my chapter on ethics. How is the age of acceleration affecting ethics? And that chapter in my book is called Is God in Cyberspace? And that comes from the best question I ever got on book tour, 1999. I'm in Portland, Oregon at the Portland Theater. I'm selling Lexus Neology. A man stands up in the balcony at question time and says, Mr. Friedman, I have a question. Is God in cyberspace? And I said, I have no idea. No one's ever asked me that before. And frankly, I felt like an idiot. So I went home and I called one of my real spiritual guides. He's a great Talmudic scholar, Rabbi Tzvi Marks. I got to know him at the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem when I was the New York Times correspondent there. He lives in Amsterdam, married to a Dutch priest, a very interesting guy. And I got him in Amsterdam and I said, Tzvi, I got a question I'd never had before. Is God in cyberspace? What should I have said? And he said, well, Tom, in our faith tradition, we actually have two concepts of the Almighty, a biblical and a post-biblical concept. The biblical concept says God is almighty. He smites evil and rewards good. And if that's your view of God, he sure isn't in cyberspace, which is full of pornography, gambling, cheating, lying, prevarication, and terrible talk. And now we know fake news, okay? But he said, fortunately, we have a post-biblical view of God that says God manifests himself by how we behave. So if we want God to be in cyberspace, if we want cyberspace to be an ethical realm, we have to bring him there by how we behave there. Well, I really liked his answer, and it went on in greater depth, and so I put it in the paperback edition of Lexus and the Olive Tree, where I forgot about it and none of you saw it. 20 years later, I'm working on this book, and I suddenly find myself retelling that story. And I said, why are you retelling that story? It's because our lives have now moved to cyberspace. It's now where we work, where we learn, where we find a date, where we meet a spouse, where we engage with friends and family. It's where we do commerce. Cyberspace is now where we interact in more and more ways. There's just one problem. Cyberspace is a realm where we're all connected, but no one's in charge. And boy, didn't we learn that in this election. Who do I call if I get hacked? 1-800, Putin hacked me, please stop him. There are no police, no judge, no courts in cyberspace. Our lives have moved to a realm where we are all connected, but no one is in charge. So how do you get ethics in cyberspace? That's one reason I realized I was asking. The other reason is that in a world of amplified powers, of machines and humans to this scale, I think we're standing now at a moral intersection we've never stood at before as a species. In 1945, we entered a world where one country could kill all of us. If it had to be one country, I'm glad it was ours. I think we're entering a world now where one person can kill all of us, and where all of us could actually fix everything. We have never stood at this intersection before as a species where one of us could kill all of us, and all of us could actually feed, house, clothe, and educate every person on the planet with the same powers. We have never stood at an intersection where one of us could kill all of us and all of us could fix everything. What does that mean? It means we've never been more godlike as a species. And if we are going to be godlike, we all better have the golden rule. Do unto others as you wish them to do unto you, because we now live in a world where more people can do unto you and you can do unto others than ever before. And every faith has their version of the golden rule. And we better scale it. So where does the golden rule come from? How does it scale? I think it comes from two places primarily: strong families and healthy communities. That's where you learn to do unto others as you wish them to do unto you. I'm not an expert on strong families. I hope I built one, but I never presume to lecture anyone on that subject. But I am an expert, as Joanne is, on healthy communities, because I grew up in one. This small town in Minnesota called St. Louis Park, outside of Minneapolis. So the last two chapters are about this community and what I learned growing up there. The short story is the Jews in Minneapolis all lived in a ghetto in the north side with African Americans, not because there was integration, but because we were both stuck there. Minneapolis was the capital of anti-Semitism. My parents couldn't join AAA, for instance, until Hubert Humphrey became mayor. And he cleaned it out of city government, a big hero in our house. In the 50s, after the war, the boys come home and the Jews all escape the north side of Minneapolis in one mass migration in 3 years between roughly 1953 and 1956. I was born in 53. My parents were part of that migration. They all moved to one suburb, the only one that didn't have restricted covenants and had enough housing stock, and that was this place called St. Louis Park. My uncle and aunt moved on one side of us, and my other uncle moved on the other side of us. We all just moved together. So a suburb that had been 100% Protestant Catholic Scandinavian overnight became 20% Jewish, 80% Protestant Catholic Scandinavian. If Sweden and Israel had a baby, it would be St. Louis Park, okay? And we suddenly had this experiment in pluralism and inclusion, where you had, we the Jews of the northern tundra who called ourselves the frozen chosen, we and these Scandinavians all had an experiment in how you build an inclusive community. And it was pretty interesting. And we got to know each other. And there were crushes and friendships and broken things and broken bones and whatnot. But over a period of 30 years, we built a pretty remarkable community. Because I went to high school, or went to Hebrew school, or religious school, or lived in the same neighborhood with the Coen brothers, Al Franken, Norman Ornstein, Michael Sandel, Peggy Ornstein, Alan Weissman, Dan Wilson, who wrote Someone Like You with Adele, the Hauptmann brothers, the great stamp artists who won the National Book Award. So it was a pretty interesting place, and we all were affected by it. Sandel's communitarianism, my own centrist politics, the Coen brothers' own art, Al Franken, Ornstein. We all took a little bit of Minnesota and we took it out into the world in our own form of civic engagement. And what was the secret to St. Louis Park was they had amazing leaders, rather ordinary people, but amazing in their own way, who generated a lot of communal trust, and that trust fed back on the leaders so they could create an incredibly progressive high school. I come back 40 years later. I left St. Louis Park in 1971 to discover the world, and I came back 40 years later and found the world had discovered St. Louis Park. Now my high school is 50% white Protestant Catholic Scandinavian, 10% Jewish, 10% Hispanic, and 30% Somali and African American. The same suburb that took the Jews took the Somalis with the same sort of progressive impulse. Now the inclusion challenge is so much deeper and wider, religiously and racially. But ain't that the story of America? And ain't that the story of the world? And now my little suburb is really a microcosm of the challenge of the world. So my book and my talk ends with my book's theme song. And the song is by one of my favorite singers, Brandi Carlile. She's a great country folk singer. And I believe it's the anthem of our time. The song is called the I, E-Y-E. And the main refrain is, I wrapped your love around me like a chain, but I never was afraid that it would die. You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye. And I believe my 3 accelerations, they are like a hurricane. I believe we have a politician who wants to build a wall against the hurricane. I think you have to build an eye. The eye is the healthy community. It moves with the storm, draws energy from it, but creates a platform of dynamic stability within it where people can feel protected, respected, and connected. And I believe the great struggle in America, and I think across the whole industrial world in the coming years, is going to be between the wall people and the I people. And my book is a manifesto for the I people. Thank you very much. Thank you.
For more on this program and other Carnegie Ethics Studio productions, visit carnegiecouncil.org. There you can find video highlights, transcripts, audio recordings, and other multimedia resources on global ethics. This program is made possible by the Carnegie Ethics Studio and viewers like you.